everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest. We have director, or maybe former director, Edwin Allen Marshall, or as we all know him, at least Jake and I know him as Eddie. Welcome, Eddie.
Hey guys,
Hey, Eddie.
thanks for having me.
This is an unusual little topic we're talking about because we did a film review last week in which Jacob and I disagreed on the final recommendation, but we both agreed it's worth watching. And this film is Pastor Shepherd. Now, there's other things I wanted to talk to you about, Eddie, but let's just start with the movie because I had 1,000 questions when I was watching it. I know Jake does, but I guess uh, first of all, I'm glad you're still talking to us after the review,
I'm talking to me, not you. You're talking about.
Eddie. So
Said I'm talking to you, Jacob.
That's right. So far, you haven't talked to me at all.
Yeah, so never mind.
I guess I would start. I mean, you could talk about Don Worley. I was just thinking about this morning because I always thought the movie was going to be about this pastor and this televangelist. I had these ideas about the movie going in, and you said it was controversial. To me, Eddie, before you talk, and you could talk about Don Worley because I want you to explain him and who he is and where he came from because I couldn't get my eyes off him. It's a very interesting performance, and you could talk about him, but I want to just give you my take on what this movie is about, and maybe you could comment on it. To me, the movie, and I could be misinterpreting it, and you could tell me, to me, the movie is about a man with a love for his parent, his aging parent, and trying to figure out what to do about it. And as he stumbles onto these little adventures. That's for me, but I don't know. Maybe you could comment on that, and then talk about Don Worley and where you found him.
Yeah, no, that's you hit it very well. The movie's about more than that, of course, but sort of the shepherd character that we find early on in the movie is he's concerned for his mother. You know, she's essentially on her death couch. Pun intended, you know. You have to see the movie to understand that. But you know, it's interesting. I think all of us at some place in our life, some stage in our life, we want to please our parents or a mentor or something, you know. And so that's a part of also how we find him, you know, that he thinks these fleecers, these televangelists, the bad televangelists, right? The exceptions, the actual not stereotype, but you know, opposite of really what a pastor is, for the comedic sense of it and the irony of it, because it happens in the world. He thinks they're charlatans, but at the same time, he's on this journey that we discover, and this goes back to how did I meet Don Worley? How did Pastor Shepherd come about? And he was using a lawyer that I've used before here in LA. Don's from Texas. He is actually Don Worley, Pastor Shepherd, is a personal injury attorney, very prominent in Houston. And did you know that part, Ruben? I see the smile on your face.
I did because I did some research on him, but I never talked to Ruben about it.
And really, you know, super just intelligent guy. Also a stand-up comedian. You know,
Oh wow.
yeah, which is not, you know, I'm not punning on it, but any kind of acting, you know, any public speaker has to do that, and he does litigate, so he's in front of juries, and he's got to, you know, bring that ethos and pathos and really be convincing. I don't think that's why he acts. I think he has a passion for acting. So he had already created the character of Pastor Shepherd, and it was a, you know, couple 3,000 subscriber back in 2006, I think, when I first saw it, 2007, when this lawyer sent me the link that Don had used and that I'd worked with before. And he knows that I developed. He'd done some projects with me, this lawyer, Kevin. And he said, "Hey, I think you'll like this. Check this out. I'm working with this guy right now." And I laughed out loud. And it's essentially the video clip that's right at the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
which is, God, I don't want to be a poor man, I don't want to give the book away, but I'll give it to you for 89.95 or whatever it was, 82.45. So I just I started watching I had already done some social media stuff even way back then because I had another movie that we had on MySpace and we were marketing it, social media marketing it. I know a lot of people don't know what MySpace is. Sort of think Facebook.
All right.
And I think because of that, this attorney sent it to me. And Don was looking for a producer to develop the character, Pastor Shepard. So he and I connected, and we brought Ben Boheme, who is also a YouTube personality, and it has really, really funny writing. Ben does, very ironic writer, and he did the first draft based on some personal experiences that Don had. One you'll find very interesting, Jacob.
Oh, I can't wait to hear.
R-word. And that's how I got plugged into Don Worley and sort of involved in the Pastor Shepard production.
What, go ahead.
Originally, I was brought in to develop it as a development producer, which is what I did for many years.
Oops, sorry about that. Did you think that when you're developing, and did you want to right away direct it, or were you thinking, no, you're just like, hey, I'm going to be part of the production team?
Well, actually, sort of, I had another project called Paper or Plastic. And it was with all YouTubers. That's how I met Ben going, right? And all of the sort of prominent, Spricket 24, et cetera, all the prominent YouTubers back then, I had attached to it. And I was developing it. And it was a one location shoot in a supermarket. And Don had read it and he liked it. And long story short, we were coming back from Sundance. We were still developing the script. It was like halfway written. Or, Ben had gotten about halfway through the first draft. And we were driving back from Sundance, and Don said, what would it cost you to do Paper or Plastic? And I told him the number. He said, I'd like to fund that. And so my producing partner at that time, James Swisher, up in Oregon, that's where he lives, but, today you can live anywhere and be everywhere. And I called him at a roadside stop. I said, hey, Don's wanting to fund Paper or Plastic. He says, well, if he's going to fund anything, he should fund Pastor Shepard, right? So the rest of the drive on the way back, we talked about that. And Don said, and I think you should direct it. And I said, okay. I mean, Don might direct that today.
Oh, that's cool.
I think the moral of this story is directors, producers, hire an actor with money. So, okay. With a lot of
do what?
Hire an actor with a lot of money and talent. So,
you mean Don?
Don, yeah.
He didn't get paid, so he wasn't hired. It was his project, right?
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
he helped develop it. Yeah.
What Don ends up being, right, is the star of the movie. I mean, it's his vehicle, right? It's his character, right? And the executive producer. And that's not that foreign. And I'll tell you an example, or that it's not that rare. It might be more rare today, but in the independent world, it's not that rare. Kevin Costner, brilliant businessman that he has been, went over to Cal State Fullerton, right? Yeah. And he majored in business and minored in acting. Yeah. And he was on the baseball team at Cal State, which they have a good baseball team.
Yes, they do.
What's that?
I said, yes, they do.
So when he came out, it's hard to, you gotta spend years showing up on bit parts, and he didn't want to do that. I don't know all this for fact, but it's something along this line. And so he took his business smarts and he funded No Way Out. That was his first major role.
That's right.
So and came back and he became a commodity. And so he was the executive producer because he brought the funding, and he was the lead actor in No Way Out. And then he went on to do this other little silly movie called Dances with Wolves.
Yeah.
which
The story behind that was interesting. Yeah, I've read about that. I do.
I take that back. He did, before he did Wolves, he did Field of Dreams.
Oh no, and he did other stuff also, right? I mean, he did.
No, I mean, I think he went from No Way Out to Field of Dreams.
Okay, okay, yeah.
And that, yeah, chronology. Yeah.
I do want to say for those who haven't seen Pastor Shepherd, this relates to the next question. One of the things I really liked about it is that so you have the Worley character who's front and center, and then you have these minor characters like one of them played well by Danny Trejo, but there's no wasted performance. So and I think this is saying something for the writers for sure, because the writers gave something for the actors to do, but nothing was wasted. I was really impressed by the doctor scene, and the security guard and all the other things. I guess how does the director elicit these type of performances? What did you do, or did you have to do anything?
Well, first off, Danny wasn't the minor character. I know what you're saying. He wasn't the star, right? But actually, he was the name in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you why we went with Danny. Why I went for Danny, because that was my call, suggested by Ben Going, because he put Phil Anderson, who Danny plays, or Phil Henderson, right?
Very good.
Right. Just to tell you, because of the irony of it, is in witness protection, right? So in this little community of cabins, right, where Shepard lives, and in the script, Ben wrote, "Think Danny Trejo," when he introduced Phil sitting on the porch. He said, "Think Danny Trejo," because it was very important, the irony that his last name's Henderson, but he's the furthest thing from a Swede. So Danny Trejo immediately gives you this visual, right, that was really crucial to Shepard, seeing the ethnicity and assuming that he couldn't speak English, right? So it was sort of just a reference that it'd be Danny. I said, let's get Danny, and we got him. He liked the script. His manager was really great to work with, and he was brilliant in it. He was so good. Danny, I remember one, like maybe I don't know if it was the second day or the second hour or whatever. It was very early on. I went up and I gave him a little bit of direction. He goes, boss, I got this. I was like, cool. And he did. Maybe a screen direction or something like that, where he needs to be looking.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I wanted another take on it, I didn't really have to tell Danny. He got the material, and he's an actor through and through. Through and through. I don't have to say that, but in my experience with him, he was great.
He seemed like he was enjoying it as well, and it's not a typical in our mind. I think that's why he threw us off a little bit. Not typical Danny Trejo film, and so you got to see him do something different.
Very Kaskins type. But back to your question, Ruben. I'm sorry, I didn't really answer totally. I think we had 2 or 3 days of casting, and one of them was in Los Angeles before we headed over to Wimberley, Texas, which is 30 minutes south of Austin. It's a little charming town with hot springs and a lot of specialty stores and crafts stores, and great restaurants and awesome people. And they hosted us. They really embraced the shooting there. It was great. And the cottages that we shot in, Don owned. That was like an investment property of his. So we owned the cottages. We owned that property, which makes a big difference. Because I'll deviate a little bit and I'll come back to your original question, but something you guys said in the review, this was not a low budget film. This was an ultra low budget film. Literally, that's the SAG terminology for it. And at that time, an ultra low budget film you could not spend more on the movie than $200,000 total. Whereas a low budget film, I think then was $500,000 by SAG standards, right? And or DGA. So it was an ultra low budget film, right? And we didn't even have money where we could be renting property and be on it for the 20 days of shooting plus 2 or 3 weeks of pre-production. So we had the one day of casting in Los Angeles. One of the things that happened was on that trip back from Las Vegas, I pretty much had a finished script for Paper Plastic, but Pastor Shepherd's script was not done yet. It was pretty far along, but it still needed time. And Don said, I need to budget this film, finance this film by spring. You guys can read into that any way you want. It's totally legitimate. I'm just, taxes, write-off, right? For that year or the previous year, whatever, and totally legit. So we had to go. I mean, Sundance then was in February. So we had to be on the ground,
Wow.
I think March or April, early April, shooting or spending in Wimberley. So, we didn't have a lot of casting time. The internet was not great for casting back then. This is like 08, 09. There was some online casting, but you couldn't see videos and things like that. So we did another casting session, and we cast probably, I'd say 2/3 of the film in LA. And then the other third we cast in Wimberley. The depth, the pool, the depth of acting pool there, all of Texas wouldn't even compare to Hollywood. But at the same time, we couldn't afford to fly people out and put them up.
Right.
Right. Now with Danny, of course, we had to put him up, but he slept in a cottage, just like most everyone else. Some people slept. One crew member slept on top of the pool table in the rec room, and another crew member slept under the pool table in the rec room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Was it a 30-day shot shooting though?
Pardon?
Was it 30 days to shoot it? How long did it take?
20.
20 days.
I mean, every day burned money, right? So you have to get a tight schedule. So, how did these performers bring such great performance? Because I agree with you, Ruben. There was not one performance in there that I was unhappy with. Not one. They all stood up and just did their thing, and they were great. They were really on it. From Shep all the way down to Mom, who never said much more than and that took a lot for her to be on that couch all that time in the back of that hearse, on that couch in a plastic chair, in the back of or front of a ice cream truck. I mean, all that is very physically demanding for someone of her age, but she was a solid actress. So this gets into the DP thing, etc.
I was just gonna ask you about that.
Challenges and there always are.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said somewhere, maybe in one of the pre-questions you sent me, that a movie's the hardest thing you've ever done, right?
It is.
You had kids.
Okay, number 2. That's fair.
Before you get
further on that, Ruben, you don't understand.
Before you get into the DP, I think let's just
I'm not going to get into it quite
well,
yet.
I just want to say one thing.
I had almost no time to rehearse with them.
Oh, wow.
They started rehearsing with themselves, and Matthew F. Perry, which I'm going to tell you what F stands for.
Okay.
Freaking.
I was about to edit you, sir.
So Matthew F. Perry, who was associate producer on this, / delivered the hearse to us from the East Coast that we bought online, / also writer, one of the writers, he would rehearse with them a lot for me, because I was just, we had another producer and myself as a producer, and I was directing. And we had, those warlike, low budget, ultra low budget challenges every single minute. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to, is it Dewey? Who, the boss?
His character was Dewey, right? I don't know what his actual name is. I can't think of it
Josh
right now.
Perry, Dewey. I just want to bring him out as
Josh Perry and Scott Perry.
yes. We can't forget their performances, especially Dewey's, Josh Perry.
And see, this is the thing is when you say, you didn't say side actors, but you did, but you didn't mean it that way. I don't think they were stars in the movie. They were lead actors in the movie, right? You get over a certain amount of lines with SAG, and you're a lead, right? Versus a day player, versus a walk on, versus an extra. Extras can't say any words. Once an extra says a word on a SAG movie, this was a SAG movie, by the way, SAG ultra low because Danny was in SAG.
Right.
It was not SAG until Danny signed on. And oh, my Lydia, my poor producer, that just threw so much paperwork on top of her. I did a film after this called Running for Grace in Hawaii, and I ended up having to handle, besides the investors and the talent and everything, I ended up having to handle the
SAG paperwork.
SAG and DGA paperwork. And I called Lydia, this is years afterwards, right? 10 years after Pastor Shepherd. And I said, oh my God, I'm so sorry you had to do that. This is a nightmare. And I'm not bagging on SAG on that. Ooh, SAG. I'm not bagging on SAG on that so much as it's a lot of work. Ton of work.
This is good. By the way, this is good stuff, Eddie. This is an education for us. Getting into all you're providing here is information that a lot of us don't know. Nobody knows really, except people like you who are in the industry. That adding a Danny Trejo to the Pastor Shepherd cast required so much extra, paperwork and things because he is Danny Trejo.
Yeah. And then everybody has to be Taft-Hartley who has any lines. It become and even if the Taft-Hartley isn't very expensive, which I don't think it was then, it's not on an ultra low, but the paperwork to Taft-Hartley then, right? I remember going into the office, which was also Lydia's cottage, going in the office a couple times and just stacks of paper. Because back then you were still printing stuff out. PDF wasn't as common. You definitely could not sign things digitally. And there was just stacks of paperwork all over her made bed, or who knows, unmade bed, in her kitchen and stuff. And that was during the day, we would use that as a production office. And I never hardly ever saw her out of there because she was just buried.
Now,
yeah.
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say you can't. I mean, if you don't do that, then you don't get a Danny Trejo, which really helps your film in a lot of different ways. Not just the acting piece, but also people wanting to see the film. Attracting an audience. But so it's like a monster you have to do, right? I mean, you have to do that sometimes because of what you're trying to accomplish.
Educators,
Yeah.
becoming so is it accredited as an educational?
Yeah, it's a credential accredited. Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of private schools are not accredited because just cost and the work to do that, right? Or the amount of energy spent to do that to become accredited, and then they have to change some of the curriculum and do certain things. Yeah. So, yep. To use Screen Actors Guild actor, you have to become a guild film and or a DGA director, or WGA material. And we were only, because of Danny, the only one thing. I did a film in I was first film I ever produced on. I was associate producer in '99 that had Kiefer Sutherland, Robert Carlyle, a lot of Japanese talent. And Kiefer was our last lead attachment. We were non-SAG until then because a lot of these talent came out of Europe. Screen Actors Guild of America, SAG, right? And so once Kiefer came on, this was a multi-million-dollar film. Once Kiefer came on, that at least probably increased the budget by a third of millions of dollars. Not for Kiefer per se. Everybody had to bump up. Everybody had to become Taft-Hartley all of the meal breaks, etc., changed.
So just by his casting, everything else is
It doubled our budget, and our budget was 100 initially.
Got it.
Because basically Don had said, "Hey, he said, how much can you pay for plastic?" I said 100. So poor Don, but lucky Don, because the movie got made and he looks great in it. He plays great in it. It sold. It sold around the world. It's been seen around the world. I'm not saying it made loads of money, because that comes up to another one of your questions you asked me earlier, or asked me on the sheet. But it literally doubled the budget essentially. Almost.
Oh wow.
Well, I wanted to ask that question, but was the director of photography question answered before we go on to the reception of the film? Was that answered?
Well,
or was
I don't think I really asked the question. I mean, what I wanted to share with you, Eddie, it was that.
I went and had lunch with Mark this week, who's the DP.
Oh crap! after I trounced him.
I saw the review because I sent it to him.
Oh god!
I really loved it. I loved your review. I laughed and laughed and laughed. Because you guys,
Jacob.
I sent it. I sent it to a lot of the key players, including Don. I haven't heard back from him yet. I know he's juggling a lot of things right now. But I went. I didn't just text or call Mark. I went and sat down with him, and I said, you inherited the angst or the grr of ultra low budget, right? But here's what's really interesting. I looked at the movie again after you said that, Jacob, after you made that observation, and I was so impressed with the cinematography, right? And what I mean by that is, I'm not saying it's a cinematic movie, right? I'm saying that everything's sharp, all the coverage is there. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of dollying. There wasn't a lot of moves that you see in high budget movies today, or even in low budget movies today. And a lot of that was because we just didn't have the time, and I didn't even have the energy, other than let's get the coverage and let's do it nicely, right? But I want to say one thing here that you wouldn't know unless I said it, and that's yes, I had developed features, and I had developed some pretty big features before this came along. And I had always wanted to be a director. Everyone wants to be a director. I don't care what they say, they want to be a director. Even though they end up being an editor or producer or whatever, everybody starts out wanting to be a director, right? Because that's like the artiste part of it, right? You get to the sculptor, right, if you will, with visuals. So when the opportunity came along, I was like, yeah, this is great. And then after I said yes, I thought, I've never developed a comedy, let alone produced a comedy, let alone directed a comedy. And so the internet was around, so I did do some searching, and I went on to DGA, Directors Guild of America. I said, how to direct a comedy? And the best thing it said was, have fun. A really important part on the set of a comedy. And maybe this plays into some of your other point, Ruben, about the performances, is make it a fun set. And we had fun. I'm not saying we had irresponsible fun, or we weren't watching the clock or the budget. We enjoyed the material, we enjoyed the performances, we had fun. So to me, that was more important than having this cinematic, approach. And another thing that impacted me on this movie, the process of doing it, is I thought, this is the silliest script in the world. It's so out there. This character is so silly, but I love him. And like, what have I ever seen like this? And then I realized it's very Napoleon Dynamite. I'm not saying my, effort and results of Pastor Shepard are very Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, the character's very Napoleon Dynamite, right? Like
I would say so.
And Napoleon's always like, he's like mouth breather the whole time, constantly. Napoleon Dynamite, through the whole thing, he's like got that same look on his face. Gosh, And I really love Napoleon Dynamite. I loved it then. I still love it today. It's one of the films that I can watch over and over, and there are very few films that I can watch over and over. And what I thought about with Napoleon Dynamite that applies to Pastor Shepherd, to this genre, that I sort of call sillyism, is you look at it, you look at a chef, you look at a security guard in Pastor Shepherd, you look at Napoleon Dynamite, you look at his sidekick, I can't remember if his name was Jesus or whatever. You know, you look at these different characters, Uncle Rico, you know.
Pedro was his guy.
Pedro, yeah. Uncle Rico, you know. You look at these different characters, you're like, this is so stupid. Nobody's, well, I guess I do have a cousin that's sort of like that. And then they have some friends that are sort of, you know what I mean? So it touches on this really interesting side of the human experience that we all experience sometimes. And so back to the whole thing with Mark Putnam, who was the perfect DP for this. I wanted more than anything to focus on setting up the scene and then bringing the equipment to them, letting them, you know, I would definitely speak with the talent and say, this is what you want, you know, this is your want, not go over there and be mad, right? You want to rip their badge off their chest, you know, or you want to sell that dog, that freeze-dried dog, you know, you want to sell them 2 freeze-dried dogs, whatever it might be. I wanted to help the talent have their motivation and then not rehearse a lot. I was sort of embarrassed that I wasn't rehearsing director then, but now I know I'm not. I just don't like it. I like it to be more spontaneous. You know, they can rehearse as much as they want. They can bring things they want. Because I'm always about, let me see how you want to do it, you know? And a lot of times that's what. So back to Mark, I pity any DP who has to shoot an ultra low budget film. And if you look at it again, Jacob, you'll be really impressed with his work, because all I wanted, right, was I wanted good composition, I wanted the good blocking, which is partly me, you know, with talent, and I wanted it sharp, and I wanted it to communicate. Like even the scene, Ruben, where you talk about the doc, right? That's a mise-en-scene scene, right? You're seeing 3 things going on in that shot in one shot, and mom in the background when she turns her head a little bit, right? Cranks her neck. That is cinematography, but it's very subtle. But the big thing that Mark did that's amazing is there was so much vehicle work in this, so much in the car,
right.
on the road, following the car, shooting in the car. That's not easy with a low budget at $500,000, let alone an ultra low budget.
I'm glad we're talking about this. I'm sorry, Ruben, real quick, because you're kind of setting me straight, because it makes, you know, I've been on a set, of course, you know, I've done things, and I think you know that, and so it makes me remember the process, and that you said something really key. He had to cover all the scenes, and you only had 20 days to shoot, and you know, it's every day's money, and a lot going on.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. One of you said, I think you both said, it doesn't look like a low budget movie, but we could tell it's a low budget movie, but it doesn't look like a low budget. You know what really does that more than anything else? Sound, good sound. You can have a crap picture, and I don't mean that we did, and I don't mean like really bad, but you can have a pretty bad picture. As long as your sound is pretty good, people will hang with you. But you can have the most beautiful cinematography that you spend $100 million on, and it screams bad production.
Yeah.
You know,
And so the sound mixer on this and the post sound mixer, they were brilliant. I loved it, their work.
I want to say again, for those who didn't see the movie or our review, you know, Jacob mentioned something about the director, the DP. He had a problem with things, and I just want to say we've learned this through Jake and I have done so many reviews at this point. We've seen so many movies. We carry our own biases into movie making. Jake has his biases. I carry mine, and I would just say, because my interest is comedy. I just see comedy all the time. Literally every day I see comedy on stage. When I perform it, I see others. There's comics that get up on stage that people don't like because they're one-liner comics and they're very shticky. But I have this one rule, and it's a hard, fast rule, but not everybody has this rule. If I'm laughing, I don't care if you're sticky. I don't care if you bring up props because it's so hard to make me laugh. It just is. And I was laughing so much at Pastor Shepherd that to me, it's a pass because I see comedies that don't make me laugh. So
Right.
to me, I really, but I could see where other people would say, wait a minute, what about these other?
Very polarizing film, not just on the controversial, R word and things like that, but also on and the controversy of talking about religion, right? And um, televangelists, things like that. But also it's it's polarizing in who thinks it's funny. Forget the controversy part, just that kind of, like, I know people. I think as many people hate Napoleon Dynamite as love Napoleon Dynamite, which
Yeah.
shocks me because I think Napoleon Dynamite is hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a kind of a good dovetailing into the reception um, of this film. You alluded to this idea of some people might have been offended. By the way, I don't understand why people are offended. You know what's interesting? The Pastor Shepherd character really wasn't making a judgment on the televangelist so much. He was just concerned, to me anyway, about his mother who was obsessed with it. And yes, you did have elements of it, but to me, are we protecting slimy televangelists who are just grubbing for money? That concerns me that you had pushback on that anyway at this at this day and age.
I really haven't personally. Maybe one little experience, but in the comments you can see it sometimes. I mean, and I'm not saying they're the same, but in the comments you can see, you know, Trumpers. And I'm talking about like fanatical Trumpers, right? Who just like blindly will follow him off of a cliff, or Bideners, whatever, side of the spectrum that they're on. There's people who would just blindly follow, and they won't. They think any criticism or any irony or parody of what they value or see as important to them is an attack.
I did think though that your background had something to do with even the sensitivity of it all. I think you could have railed against it because you and I know we've seen some pastors that need a little railing, and then there's others that have been a blessing. But I thought before I saw the film, Eddie, I was thinking he's gonna go off on these knuckleheads, and like Ruben said, I that didn't happen, and it was done it was done tastefully. I thought, wow, it just threw me off. I didn't know what I was gonna watch, and then I saw it. I go, oh, he wasn't trying to make a statement here, but in a way though, you were, as in your sensitivity to it, and you're letting us know, hey, there's some slime balls out there, right? But not all of them are slime balls.
Yeah.
Has this movie caught the attention of has it caught on in some way um in looking back? Tell me a little bit about its reception, Eddie.
Well, Napoleon Dynamite was four-walled for 14 months. Four-wall is where the filmmakers or the distributor will actually go rent the theater and project the movie. I'm using old school terms, but basically show the movie in a theater and market it that it's going to be there to whatever demographic they're trying to get at different regions or cities across the country. They did that for 14 months before Napoleon Dynamite took off. Even though Napoleon Dynamite had done so well at Sundance, I think it won it. But audience award or something. But Shep came at a really strange time. Well, first off, there's no way that SAG Ultra Low is going to get a theatrical, because to roll out a theatrical is minimum $1 million or $2 million, even what New Line did with Napoleon Dynamite, right? But that was a different era too. That was many years before Shep. So I think it resonated poorly with a lot of those who just thought it was attacking Christianity or pastors in the US. Because I come from that background. I come from that circle. It's really ironic. I never wanted to make a movie that preaches to the choir. I never wanted to make a Christian film. But in some ways, I think because I believe, like I mountain bike, and if I see other mountain bikers who are going by horses or pedestrians up in the mountains on trails, narrow trails, and they're startling them or making them feel fearful, I'll see them later somewhere on the trail and I'll be like, hey, we're supposed to yield first to horses, then to pedestrians, and we're the ones who are supposed to always stop for them, right? Just to let them know. Because I think you should police your own. And I really feel like a lot of times within certain religious groups, all religious groups, they don't police their own enough. And in this case, I think Shep does that a little bit. It points out how stupid it looks and silly to sit up there and talk about Jesus for the sake of money. We love you. We'd love you to pick up that phone. You got that one, Ruben. I loved it.
Yeah.
Send us your money. But I think that in the reception, initially, there were a lot of keyboard warriors that went after the movie that way. And then eventually it landed in Europe, England in particular, and people got it and they loved it. And their comments were awesome because they're not as hypersensitive to questioning things within faith. I think they've been doing it a few more years. I'm not saying they got it right, wrong, or indifferent how their faith works. I'm just saying they're more receptive to the kind of thing that would police itself, if you will.
That's good. But besides the budget, because we've talked about the budget so much with this time we've had, what would you do different if you had to shoot it again? I mean, maybe that is the whole thing. Because I didn't know that you were under 200,000. You said that makes the big difference if you have money. But is there anything else you would say now, looking at the film and say, oh, I might have done this a little differently? Obviously, we've enjoyed the comedy. Ruben has mentioned of that, and the performances were, and I shared it as well. I thought they were great. But would you do anything different?
I honestly don't know if there's anything we could have done different.
Mm.
Would I have liked to have had more money? Yes.
It's a big one.
So that the sound mixer didn't have to sleep in a tent because he was 90 minutes away. He was out of Austin, but he would come and sleep in a tent on the cottage property, because he didn't want to drive back and forth. We'd shoot 10, 12-hour days, and he would then have a 90-minute drive home, then a 90-minute drive back in the morning. I was under the misperception that he was 30 minutes from home. He'd go home to his bed. But once I found that out, it broke my heart. So I wouldn't want more money just for the movie, but maybe more money for the cast and crew, right? But you couldn't do that because the leap from a SAG ultra low to a low budget was $300,000.
Big jump
for this type of film.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can't say I'd do anything differently. I mean, yes, it would be nice if we had more time to finish script because the script was still being rewritten, right up to first day of principal photography. And even after that, we would rewrite some stuff for the next day. But that's not totally uncommon in film, even big budget.
Well, I think that it's an amazing accomplishment, and working with all these different actors. I do want to also mention the Maria Elena Laz, because we mentioned all the other major parts, but fine performance, and it's fun reviewing a film that a friend of yours made, and we enjoyed it. Any last words about Pastor Shepherd before we pivot? I want to be respectful of your time, Eddie.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
And I think I alluded to it a little bit, it being one of the most difficult things that you could do is do a film. And I think people who've done it, and like you understand the difficulties, and you shared with, in this episode, a lot of things that you had to encounter and your crew had to encounter. But what I know that you're not doing films right at this moment. Does it give you kind of a bad taste because going through the whole process? I mean, why would you to me, after doing it, Eddie, what I'm trying to say is that I did not want to do it anymore. It's like this killed me. This was too much. Is that how you did you feel that way sometimes, or do you feel that way? Because it's a lot of work.
Over 20 years, I get up every morning and I would think I love my job. I can't wait to get to work, right? Whatever that is. Roll over to the, dining room table, write some more, do the budget or whatever, or go into an office, go to location. And then after about 4 films being completely mishandled by distributors, and I have to say, I feel like the distributor, Pastor Shepard, did a good job. Now, was it unfortunate that only Danny's on the cover? Right? Ponce is not on the cover. Who is Josh Perry, who plays Dewey. Ray Elena Loss not on the cover. He's the lead of the movie, right? And Pastor Shepard's not even on the cover, right?
Gosh.
And this comes back to, I don't want to say if I could do it again, I'd do it differently because I loved having Danny in it. And I think he was perfect for that role. But I felt like there was going to be more reaction from buyers overseas because Danny was in it. But they want Danny killing people. So that's why Danny's on with a bat, which is in the movie, it's like more of a gag than it is he's really going to hurt someone. I mean, he is a little bit, threatening in that.
It's a presence. Yeah.
He thinks his daughter's with a serial killer in the woodshed. But what was the exact question again? Because
I was saying it's so difficult. I can't see how you do. You said you love it. You loved it for 20 years.
I came to a place after my most recent movie where all my career as a producer since the late 90s, I said, and I started working in film in the 90s, but I started producing in the late 99, maybe 98. I'd always say every movie I've ever produced or produced on has sold. I mean, it's really hard to even say that I've made X amount of movies or even a movie, feature film, right? It's a real challenge. It's a journey. But everyone is sold. But I couldn't say that every one of them has ROI'd completely for the investor. ROI'd some, but not completely. And that's because I feel like just the distribution model and the selling of movies continues to deteriorate and continues to be very fuzzy and foggy on the math and on the revenue stream. And I just got to a place where I couldn't, in good conscience, I didn't get up in the morning and want to go to work anymore. And so I moved off, and I'm dabbling in writing now, but I don't know that I ever want to be involved again in producing a film and then selling it, because it's just too painful.
Yeah.
To see people who've trusted you with all of this resource, people who've invested with you with all their time and energy and their craft, and it be mishandled. I've had Academy Award winning actors and nominated actors, and they don't even put them on the cover, let alone mention we have this actor with, Academy Award nomination or recipient. It's like, why? And I have a theory on it, and I'll just say it right here. A lot of these sales companies, they have libraries, so they buy many, many, many movies. Yeah, you guys, I'm talking about you guys, sales companies, both domestic and foreign. They have many, many movies in their library, and they have a mortgage on them, 15, 20, 25 years. And the value in that, it's almost like sitting on a house when you buy it. You don't even put a tenant in it, but it's increasing in value because it has equity built just because real estate's going up, right? And if you don't do any changes to it, you don't have to pay as much property tax. At least in California, it's that way. and it's collateral. So you can collateralize it to make to build other houses or buy other houses, or in the case of movies, to make other movies. So I've still not put the puzzle together as to why the distributors almost want the movie, I don't want to say to fail, but they don't make, there's so many obvious decisions they don't make that would have made the movie succeed more. And I'm not talking about spending more money, just, putting names on the box. Who's in it?
I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I sort of did. That's why I stopped. Because with good conscience, I just couldn't keep going.
Well, you stopped, but I want to remind you, this is kind of related. It's kind of a nice little segue into kind of a different path, perhaps. You did stop making movies and productions and that sort of thing. However, you mentioned to me recently that you'd be open to the possibility of a documentary or two, and one of which is related to something that we've talked about at length and has opened my eyes to this topic of
Not documentaries, by the way, are notorious for never making money. So there's no expectation on that.
Okay, there you go. It's related to drug addiction and possible healing. Can you speak a little bit about that? This is where we're gonna just raise some eyebrows, I think. But I think it's pretty fascinating because you're open to perhaps making a documentary on this topic. Or should you not?
I don't remember our exact conversation on that, but I mean, if you're talking about Mom and Pastor Shepherd, right? She's a pharmaceutical.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Yes.
Um, I mean, look.
Don't worry, we can edit this out, Eddie. We can edit this out if it's
This, even sweet drinks from when we were little kids, there's just so much that we have poured into us that so many people make so much money off of. And it's industry, right? It's capitalism. I'm not anti that. I'm not anti-industry, but I do wish that we would, from birth, have a better chance at not becoming so addicted to a lot of things that are bad for us, right? I know that like Europe regulates what goes in their bread. No GMO stuff. There's no enriched white wheat or whatever, white flour. They're just generally healthier. I lived in Japan for a few years, much healthier on their diet. So then now let's go with drugs. Take that approach that we take even with our foods, which are sometimes drugs too, in a legal sense, if you will, or socially acceptable. Then we start getting into pharmaceuticals. We start getting into, I mean, like one of the big things for many years were Xanny bars for kids, which are Xanax, right? And Xanax is a pharmaceutical, and it's on so many, medicine cabinets throughout so many homes across America. Oxycontin, right? Fentanyl. All of these things are pharmaceutical drugs that either become mixed up in illegal labs or become available because they've been prescribed and then people get addicted to them, or they have them on their shelf and somebody, kids grab them. So yeah, definitely I would love to see even a feature that addressed that, but there are some, they're out there. There are documentaries and there's features that talk about drugs. I mean, Traffic was big about drugs.
Yeah.
Stephen Julian.
Yeah. I'm reminded, you mentioned Europe, and it's I have a friend who goes back and forth. She's getting her nursing degree here because it's a better nursing program in California than in Spain. But she mentions how when she comes here, she gains so much weight and she doesn't eat any differently and in Spain, but just she loses all the weight again when she eats in Spain. And how her conclusion is that the food supply in America is poisoned. I think that's really fascinating because I believe her. I believe when she says she immediately loses all her weight when she eats in Spain and she doesn't eat something to that. And I think it's pretty fascinating. So I guess we can wrap it up with more film talk, maybe, because um, I think the question is, what movies do you like? What movies can you watch, Eddie, over and over and just not get tired? I think you mentioned one of them already.
The Napoleon Dynamite. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I. It's interesting. As a producer, I have this very gracious gift given to me, where I can watch a movie that I'm working on 100 times because you have to. Because anytime you make a little change, it has a ripple effect, whether it's in story or in the quality or the technical of it. And I can watch one of the movies that I'm working on as if I've never seen it before. Now I know what's coming. I'm not trying to say that the story is, oh wow, I didn't know that, on 63rd viewing of it. But I don't like get bored to tears from doing that because I enjoy that process of putting an eye on it, and one of the things I really love to do along that line of being able to watch a movie that I work on is watch a movie 5, 10 years later that I worked on. And things that I might have been really super critical on, I'm not as critical on. Typically, it's usually I'm less critical, but whether it's technical or story. But I can't. A movie that I've seen, I'm terrible with leftovers food. Like if someone cooks, steak and potato, I don't want the steak and potato the next day. I don't want it for a week or two, and I'm with movies, there has to have a extra special meaning there. And I'll tell you the three that I thought of on that when you sent me the questions. Magnolia, P.T. Anderson, changed my life. Changed my life watching that. Incredible movie. Changed my life as a father.
Wow.
And remember when he's the regret, that TV producer, who spent life at the network. Napoleon Dynamite, because he's just so rich. And Brother, Sun, Sister Moon, Franco Zeffirelli, which to me is sort of the pure essence of becoming a believer. And I'm not trying to be preachy with that, but in my worldview, that there's so much baggage in what it is to be a believer, right, or to be a Christian. But in Brother, Sun, Sister Moon, it's basically the story from Franco Zeffirelli's approach, and it's flower child music. I don't know if you've seen it, Ruben. Brilliant. It's the 70s, and not the period that it shot in, but when he made it, or not the period it's set in. But it's St. Francis of Assisi going to war, going to the Crusades and coming back, and his conversion, and it is powerful. And I actually saw it the first time ever in Japan. A Japanese showed it to me.
I wrote it down and I'm going to see it, but I do want to make a comment on Magnolia. When you get off this call, or our show, I mean,
Soon.
Yeah, very soon because we're coming up to the end. Look up,
It's not soon.
Zoom. Look up films released. I like doing this to people. Look up movies released in 1999. Unbelievable year. It was an unbelievable year in film. And my pick for that year as best film is Magnolia. So we agree on that. It's fantastic. So the other, yeah. Jake, was there anything else you wanted to
I just want to say one last thing. I really want you to hear me here. We really appreciate having you. I mean, this is a teaching, coaching, a mentoring channel. And I look at you as a mentor, not only a spiritual mentor growing up, as being a leader and being somebody who profound things said to me and to the group of guys and gals that we grew up with, but also really in film. I did it because my wife was becoming an actress. I'm not sure if you remember that. And I wanted to be involved in her life, but I remember you went to could take some classes at PCC, and I said, I'm going to do that. And you were encouraging, and I just did it. And I just want to thank you for all that. And I don't always have a chance to thank people who had a big impact on me, but you had a major impact on my life in a couple ways. So I do thank you.
I do want to say one other thing. Thank you, Jacob. Ruben, you talked about the last scene, and this goes across my entire career in film. There's no asterisk in the credits, right? As filmmakers, we're never allowed to say, well, we meant to say this, or this was a SAG ultra low, so please forgive the, right? So all that said,
Good.
I never ever heard the observation, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I think it's actually a good observation. I never heard the observation or the comment about the final scene that you came up with, where you thought that it just looked too low budget, right? Ruben, I mean, yeah, Ruben. But it's supposed to be because this is a what am I trying to think?
He's a charlatan. He's not going to spend that much money on it.
No. The type of, I can't believe I went blank on that. The type of story it is, it's at the beginning of Pastor Shepherd, right? So it's supposed to be no budget. That's how he starts, right? It starts at that moment. So it's not supposed to be nice. It's not supposed to be a nice church. I'm not trying to explain the scene to make it play better, because once again, asterisks in movie. We're in film. We're not allowed to say, oh, no, it's supposed to be low budget or no budget. But
I love it.
I'm sufficiently chastened, and I am sorry.
Can I just say something? I love it when people who do
10 out of
films.
10 people might have felt that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I even go back and address it is I feel the most important two moments in any movie is the opening and the end, because it sets the tone for what I'm going to watch, and it sort of buttons it all up and leaves me feeling however the filmmaker wanted me to feel is the ending. And if I missed that by doing it, maybe I went too literal, and maybe that's one thing I would do differently. I don't know.
Eddie, it's pretty interesting. We're reviewing a movie this week that maybe you should see. You actually made a wise decision in becoming a filmmaker, as opposed to a filmmaker who becomes a teacher and teaches film to high school students. Wow. If you see that movie, it's called About a Teacher. Am I right? Am I not right, Jake?
Yes.
He made the right decision. And
You're going to go off on kindergarten teacher again.
I know. Ruben's like, Jake doesn't even remember any film we reviewed.
It was, if you see that review, Eddie, I say it was the worst, not only the worst film we've reviewed in Pod and Deliver, it's one of the worst films I've ever seen.
I don't agree.
And this guy gave it a good review. I'll never live it. I'll never let him live it down for the rest of his life.
What, Kindergarten Cop?
Yeah. No.
Kindergarten Teacher, but we also reviewed Kindergarten Cop. That's coming out soon. Anyway,
A Kindergarten
don't
Teacher.
Get me started. Why did you get me started on this guy?
What are you guys at odds on?
What are we at odds on?
Yeah, this new film you're talking about, Kindergarten Cop, or both?
No, we haven't reviewed. That's going to come out this week. About a Teacher. It's titled About a Teacher. We got into it over. Is this going to be our?
We're going to go at it again.
Now we're just having fun. We got into it. I'll send you the review over this movie titled Kindergarten Teacher that I still have nightmares about.
Kindergarten Teacher is not Kindergarten Cop?
No. Two different movies.
I've never seen Kindergarten Teacher.
No, and you should not.
I disagree. You watch it. That's good.
Absurd. Anyway,
let's not go over this again.
Eddie, it's been fun. Thank you for joining us on Pod and Deliver. It's been great.
Yes. Thank you. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of Pastor Shepherd as a film.
Good.
Everybody says that about their baby, and it's supposedly the director's baby. But I'm very proud of what we were able to pull off, and that it went out into the world. And I'm sure that it might challenge 2 or 3 people and encourage 1 or 2. That wasn't the purpose. It was really just to give a good laugh, but at the same time have a little bit of parody in there.
Absolutely. Watch it, everybody. On my recommendation, for sure, you can trust me. And
All right.
deliver. But I'm just saying, I'm not commenting.
I know what you're saying.
I thought you were going to murder it, Ruben. So I'm really happy.
Ruben's very honest. Just saying,
Yeah.
he's an honest dude.
I thought it was good. I did too. I thought it was going to be the end of our friendship.
And I only thought you were going to murder it because so many people tune out so quickly, right? Because it really requires like work, if you will, to figure out what am I watching. That wasn't the intent and purpose, but I had the very first time I ever saw that very first short little video, I was like, is he for real? Who is this guy? Pastor Shepherd, the actual original Pastor Shepherd.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I say you take a bat to people who talk crap about your movie. That's my solution to this.
Because it is your baby. That's true.
And you get connected. Absolutely.
What?
What's that?
No, take a bat and swing it. I'm going to swing it. Yes.
They said a bat.
Yeah, that too.
Call Danny.
I don't know if we signed off yet in terms of the sign off, but we're signing off, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.